Recording. Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this annual meeting of the DSA and Politics and Sustainability Study Group. I sent around a brief note, and thanks to Weiju from LSE for circulating that to everybody. I sent around a note, a possible agenda. Essentially, just briefly review the activity of the last year and look ahead. We may be at a little bit of a watershed in that activity's been, well, quite busy during the pandemic through the LSE UCL Land Politics Seminar Group, which has been the mainstay of our activities. And that's also been a basis for organizing conference panels in the last 2 years. But we're unsure really what added value DSA can provide, or what added value we can provide by bringing more people in. We'll say a little bit about that. Perhaps we should just introduce ourselves briefly so we know who each other are. Some of us know each other, some of us don't. Shailaja, welcome to you as well. So the DSA Land Politics and Sustainability Study Group was set up 2 years ago, I think, although it's been a common, pretty much constant theme issues of land reform DSA conference, and there have been previous study group efforts. The main purpose is really to provide a forum for people to share in research ideas and papers, particularly, but not only, for postgraduate students. And that's really been well discharged through the LSE UCL Land Politics Seminar Group, which has been open to others. But when the group was established, we also felt that it was a potential platform not for cross-fertilization between research group streams, different institutions and disciplines concerned with land and land reform, but also potentially a platform for linking research, development research on land with policy and practice. Now that partly arises out of my background, so I'll briefly introduce myself. Julian Kwon. I currently hold the position of Professor in Land and Development Practice at NRI, which is an institute of the University of Greenwich. I'm shortly going to retire, but I've been very much engaged in policy and practice really throughout my career and blending that with research, mainly through a couple of stints working with DFID as a land policy advisor, and laterally coordinating their so-called Legend program, which looked at land governance in the context of commercial land investment, and a variety of assignments. So I've been particularly concerned with the links between policy and practice, but I also felt that the group could be an important platform to bring together researchers involved in development. And I was particularly gratified to form the link with the LSE and the LSE UCL Seminar Group, which is coordinated by Professor Catherine Boone from LSE. So Catherine, perhaps you could briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll hear briefly from everybody else, particularly the new people who've joined.
Great. Well, thank you, Julian, and thanks everyone for showing up for this meeting today. Thanks to Julian for really organizing the meeting and preparing the agenda and really being the driver and the mastermind behind this. As Julian said, we've had a land politics study group at the LSE for about 7 years. About 5 years ago, we partnered with UCL, and it's basically a forum for faculty and PhD students to present their research. But during the pandemic, which coincided with teaming up with Julian, we really opened onto the world, as it were, and into a more policy-oriented audience by taking our seminar series on Zoom. We've done, and it was in that context that we created the DSA study group, and we've done DSA panels for a couple of years and some other related activities. So that brings us to where we are today.
Okay. Others, would you like to say a few brief words? I can just see you in order that you appear on my screen. Tuesday, would you like to just briefly introduce yourself and your interest in this group?
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Tuesday Gichuki. I represent the Global South in the Council. and currently coordinating the South to South mentoring initiative, which we are starting. I'm also a visiting professor in the University of Makeni, Sierra Leone. I normally take my master's class in sustainable development. My background is in architecture as well. So my interest in land. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Shailaja?
Thank you, Julian. I'm Shailaja Fennell. I'm a professor of regional transformation based in the Department of Land Economy, so maybe that says land. I'm particularly interested in thinking about alternative land use in the context of climate change. We've got a big NERC project that just started this year in Cambridge, going across to science and social sciences, looking at land use in the UK in relation to the new ELMS. But my previous work was all, I suppose, global South, Southeast Asia, and as well as Sub-Saharan Africa. So interested in my own research in rural-urban transitions and what it means for food sustainability and livelihood sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. Gerardo?
Yes, can you hear me? Hi, everyone.
Yes.
My name is Gerardo. I'm a research fellow at the Science and Policy Research Unit at the University of Sussex. And my research is on the intersection between land politics and climate mitigation technologies, meaning how these new technologies are bringing back debates on land politics in spaces that have been usually classified as idle spaces. Right? And my doctoral research was in Mexico, in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, which has the largest concentration of wind turbines in Latin America. Yeah, nice to meet you all.
Okay, thank you. Colin, would you like to say the words?
Hi everyone, I'm Colin Marks. I'm a professor of urban development planning at the Bartlett Development Planning Unit. And my interests in land are in urban land issues. So principally land markets and property rights systems, and mainly in sub-Saharan African cities where I've done most of my work. And as part of the LSE UCL Land Politics Group, I'm pleased to say that both presentations that I've done as part of that forum, that group, have led to publications. So I can certainly vouch for the nice supportive conveyor belt nature of it as something that has worked really nicely as a constructive grouping to discuss ideas.
Oh, that's very encouraging. I didn't know that, Colin. So perhaps on that note, just to say, it would be interesting just to hear a little bit more about, particularly for the new people who've joined us, a little bit more about that seminar group, how it operates, the kind of things that it's covered. And then I just thought we could have a general review of sort of pertinent developments which are relevant to the group and what it does going forward, considering the urban emphasis on this in this conference, and just a brief look at broader issues which might affect us, what's happening in UK development policy, how global policy issues in relation to land and development are shifting. And that could just help us inform us what we might do going forward next year. But Catherine, would you like to say a few words about the seminar group, how that's functioned, what it's covered? I'm conscious that some of our most active members, so Carolyn Dieterle, Weizhu Yang, who've been central to the coordination of that group, are not able to join us right now. So Catherine, or perhaps Colin as well, if you don't mind saying a few words about the role of the group and what it's done.
Sure. I mean, I would be happy to say something about that. So this is basically a workshop seminar series, as we said before, based at LSE and UCL, and it's been kind of supply driven actually, in that members, faculty, and the PhD students working on these issues, present whatever they have been working on. Actually, it's been very informal and kind of a workshop structure, as Colin was saying. So We usually meet 3 or 4 times a term. We were a little discombobulated by COVID, but we're trying to get back on our feet in a more normal way again this coming academic year. And I think we'll have 3 or 4 presentations a term. And as usual, you know, a couple of the PhD students are lined up. We're going to have a visitor at the LSE, Fausta Maganga, who's from the Institute of Natural Resource Management at the University of Dar es Salaam, as a visitor here in ID in the fall. So he'll present, and I think we'll also make a little panel for Faustin to present alongside one of our PhD students who's working on Tanzania. But it's really been, as I said, kind of a supply-driven workshop series aimed at helping, you know, mostly the people within this network move their work forward. But, you know, we've always tried to, you know, look for other people who could contribute or who want to join or who want to be sort of sucked into this network. It used to work pretty organically in the Oxford, London, Sussex area before COVID. And then, you know, in COVID, we had to sort of throw our doors open to the world. But I guess now we're sort of structurally hybrid in that sense, and that we plan to continue with the hybrid nature of the workshop. But that's about all we really have there so far. I don't know if Colin wants to chip in and say
I think,
something.
no, not much to add. I think that it's just that it's probably one of the few spaces where people can get to talk about land issues, whether they're sort of urban or rural or from different angles. So it's immensely valuable, I think, as a space to also to introduce people to others in the network. So for new scholars to come in, for PhD students, I think that it's a huge resource.
So there would indeed be room, I think, assuming the timetable's already not already fully booked up, for new people wanting to join the group who have not been part of that LSE UCL network. As I say, they're broader members anyway, but any of you who are interested in contributing a paper, or even if it's at an early stage or just bringing ideas to the group, let us know. I think we should probably, since Weiju's not here, Catherine, do you think it's okay for me to put Weiju's email on the chat so that people can get in touch with her? Because at the moment, that's the only kind of mechanism for coordination. Anybody,
right. I mean, the mailing list is completely open, and the attendance at the seminars is completely open. So it's a little harder to schedule in the presentation just because we have just only a few slots per year, but we definitely want to fill them up. So yeah, sure. I think you can put Uesho's email address. Uesho is going to finish her thesis pretty soon. So
she may need to pass it on to the people. But from the point of view of coordination, at least for coordinating the seminar group, that's something that the LSE contingent can continue to manage.
Yeah, we have a successor for Uesho. It's going to be Camilo Acero, our PhD student who's working on Colombia.
Okay. I'll just put a note on the chat with Uesho's address. So anybody who wants to get in touch, you can also contact me. I'll put my email on as well so that I know anybody else who's interested in joining the DSA group or interested in helping to develop activities at that level can also let me know. So just email myself and Weiju if you would like to join. So having said that, yeah, we are open to other contributions, but also the group has been the basis for considering what we do at conference. We had a couple of panels last year. We had one panel this year. There's been an emphasis meshing with the theme of this year's conference, really on urbanization, urban development issues. We had a successful session. Shasha, you're probably too ill. I won't ask you to say anything about it, but I was chairing it. So we had an interesting session with 4 papers. Well, not really papers, contributions. I think the new methodology did work in terms of bringing heads together. People were well informed in advance. And so we had a good discussion. Then there's your workshop that's coming up on the 16th of August on a similar theme. And I think it's quite natural, really, that the urban context is one which will continue. It has almost a greater bearing than rural land reform on land policy agendas, but of course the two are very present together. Do you want to say anything about your workshop, Shasha?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Julian. And just before I do, just to add a little testimony to the seminar group, I've presented once at the seminar group and I found it incredibly helpful. I presented a very early idea, and just for another encouraging story, I've since then managed to get funding for the research idea that I was talking about. And so I hope that will all go forward nicely. So I really valued the feedback from that group. It was very helpful. So in terms of the workshop, sorry, for those of you that I haven't met before, so my name is Shasha, which is short for Alexandra, and I'm also at the Development Planning Unit. I'm a lecturer there. And I am a sort of an economist of sorts, a sort of interdisciplinary economist that looks largely at property rights and have been working largely on informal property markets in Latin America and in East Africa. But more recently, I'm more focused on the topic of collective property and what happens to collective property regimes under the pressure of urbanization. So both when they're not protected by law and when they are protected by law, how do these play out in terms of the changing community and land use dynamics? And this is including new work in Canada on First Nations Reserve, which is what I was presenting at the seminar group on. And we're organizing with my co-author in Canada, we're organizing a seminar in August on this theme of collective property under the pressure of urbanization. And we're bringing together researchers working on ejidos in Mexico, urban villages in China, customary land in Somaliland, in South Africa, in commons in India, ecological commons, a really wide number of cases that don't often necessarily sit together, particularly in terms of bridging this kind of global north and global south division. So also Canada, North America, and New Zealand as cases. And it's open, and we really value participation from anyone who's interested. So if anybody would like to hear more about that or would like me to send them details of the panels, I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay, Shasha, thank you for that. And you reminded me, I think we skipped over a number of people in doing the introductions. We didn't give space to you. And I've realized that Oget Mohammed, we also have Muhammad Afar, who has joined us. We briefly had someone called Nuzmul on the line. So anybody else who would like to briefly introduce yourself who hasn't done already? I don't know, Ogeto or Mohammed, if you want to say a few words. Sorry for not giving you that opportunity earlier.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Ogeto Mohammed. I am a PhD student in the University of Greenwich, and I'm currently doing, I am based in Ethiopia. I didn't travel to UK so far, but I'm doing on policy and institutional options for the adoption of climate smart agricultural practices. And as it is known, Ethiopia is a country where land is politics and politics is more about land. And I'm very much happy to join this group. I am not sure whether my internet quality is good because I didn't have the light almost since yesterday evening.
We're hearing
but I'm
you
very
loud
happy
and clear.
to receive an email, and I like to work with this team.
Okay, well, that's very interesting to know. And since I've been at Greenwich, although I'm retiring, I will remain as a visiting professor associated. So I hope to meet you and discuss those ideas. Yeah, Mohammed, do you want to say a few words? Mohammed
Okay,
Ahnaf?
thank you. Yes, thank you. My name is Muhammad Ahnaf. I come from Indonesia. I am a student in Yogyakarta State University, and I think this is some interesting topic, but maybe for now I will listen first because actually my field is in education. So I just joined this discussion because I just curious about land and the topic that we will discuss today. So maybe I will listen first and try to learn from what you explain about this topic. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Well, if you're interested, you can join the seminar group and then meet others of us and then see how you want to contribute. Okay, so we're almost 3:25. We've got 35 minutes left. We really need to arrive at the position of how our activities might develop in the next year. We know that the foundation will continue to be the LSE UCL seminar group, which brings us into regular contact, but it's always possible to network by email as well. We had thought about other activities that we might develop, particularly in this context of the links between research and policy. So one of the driving factors, at least in my mind, behind the foundation group was the fact that UK government, FID, was actively interested in resourcing development work on land, land tenure security, sustainable and inclusive land administration, was particularly interested in the controversial issues of large-scale land investment and trying to ensure that that takes place responsibly. There's a whole host of practical issues around that. And DFID had intended to launch what they call a new technical facility for land, which would be open-ended in terms of where it worked, although where it worked would be probably determined by UK political priorities. But there's been a strong emphasis in UK on work in sub-Saharan Africa, also Southeast Asia to some extent. But this facility would have been something which actively really would have had an appetite for research-based knowledge and for drawing in good knowledge about land policy, the political economy of land in a variety of countries, and moving forward really on an informed knowledge basis. However, nothing has yet emerged. A new FCDO, which has taken over DFID. DFID was merged into the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, which has been quite controversial. DSA recently held a seminar on their new development strategy, although that is a very open-ended thing and it doesn't really say very much about implementation at all. So in a sense, we don't really have that practical link to provide a basis for us going out to engage with policymakers, although many of us are involved in cycling our work into practice in different countries. So in the absence of that, that may be something on which we can hold a kind of a watching brief, and we can, at least the group exists and is a way of bringing researchers together should there be any policy development that requires it. I thought it might be worth, perhaps, I don't know if anybody has any other reflections on the conference. The urbanization theme was quite prominent, and we had that panel session, which was quite successful, and we've got Shasha's workshop coming up. There was another group looking at counter-agrarian reforms. Look, how is land reform, redistributive land reform, being reversed in various countries in the global south? Quite a strong emphasis, but not exclusive, on South Africa. That was this morning, but I was unable to join it. Now, I don't know if any of you were involved in that group, if anyone has anything to say about it. Apart from that, I don't think there was a great deal of coverage of land issues at conference, but there is this overarching really climate agenda, which is probably more prominent than it ever has been in this year's conference, very focused on the implications for urbanization, for mobility and displacement. But of course, it's relevant to land as well. And certainly one of the things which I've picked up in recent years is that amongst official development agencies and donors, there's a refreshing emphasis on something people have been advocating for many years, about the importance of indigenous and customary land rights. So a recognition that community-based control of land resources may actually be, very likely to be climate positive from the point of view of deforestation, protection of biodiversity, etc. And that in many ways, indigenous groups and rural communities are custodians of the land. So that's a refreshing emphasis. I think FCDO has made grants. There's a number of facilities, such as the tenure facility, which focus on indigenous rights. So some of the UK official development resources have been shifted in that direction. One of the UK officials told me that what they did on land was very much a question, told me a year ago, it's very much a question of positioning the debate in relation to the climate debate. From my point of view, it's really a question of actual practical mechanisms to engage communities, to secure land rights, and to have more joined up local agendas. There's been quite a lot of discussion at conference about that, although not particularly on land. And then we have these continuing issues of private investment. The private investment is going to continue to be important, and therefore how to make it more accountable, more responsible, particularly in the context of those community land rights issues, the question of free, prior, informed consent. And so a whole set of development issues about decentralization, about community engagement, about gender, that sort of around the land agenda come up. Gender has been, continues to be prominent in terms of women's land rights. And it was interesting that, one of you mentioned your interest, I think it was Ogeto, your interest in information technology and land policy, which is something which is also revolutionizing the potential for land administration. And I would say the potential for good, inclusive land administration, given that technology tools are now more accessible to people. So these are likely to be continuing themes in development policy and things that we could perhaps take up. Now, I don't know if anyone else has any broad reflections you want to share about the development issues to which land is important and issues that may be relevant to our agenda going forward. We've had quite a focus on politics and political science in one way or another, Catherine, but the sustainability angle is one that's also important.
Right. I mean, I would be interested in hearing what, came up in the panels, or, what people's impressions were coming out of the panel discussions and, some of the other DSA activities.
Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't really been very engaged in any other panel apart from
but
our own.
maybe some of our,
Yeah,
some of the people here in this meeting.
we're welcoming a couple of other people who've joined.
Yeah. Sasha,
Cameron?
what about your panel? How did you, what kind of audience did you, who was the audience, or did you have a feeling about, who these people were, what brought them to your panel?
To be honest, that it was very small. We had really one or two people joining. It was a lovely conversation across the panelists and people involved in the papers, but I don't know if that was a product of I don't know if that's a reflection of the panel in particular or the DSA this year. I have to admit that I haven't really engaged very strongly in the other panels, so
you have a good excuse.
I don't know, Julian, if you saw, but
Shalaja has a hand up. Yeah, Shalaja, please.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No.
So I'm just going to say first, it's Shailaja.
Shailaja, sorry. Okay.
If you get it faster than Sam, I'll be delighted. I've been trying to teach Sam it for a while now. But no, the comment I wanted to make was, first, I wanted to ask a question. I want to know a little bit more about the seminars that have been run at LSE UCL. Just, is it all politics? Because I'm an economist. Is it all right? I just want to bring in that narrative about how it works. But I also wanted to say, so I guess like Sasha and Catherine saying, our own panels run through. So we had a 3-session panel on resilience, and there was quite a lot of conversation on land in that. But as Julian said, very much around climate change and around land use. And part of the reason that this big grant came our way was because NERC was saying, we don't know what FCDO is doing in a way, but we need to think about climate, doing it here in the global north as well as the global south. So it's quite a nice way of bringing the tools together if we wanted to do that kind of stuff. Of course, my concern is the government may not want to listen to anything. As Julian said, it doesn't mean, or as Sam said, we may give our decisions, but whether government listens is a different matter. But I would really like to learn more about what you all think in terms of your own, because you're an established group. What are the things that you found have gone forward from the last conferences? Because obviously I'm coming in at the end as I'm a rookie to this still. Thank you.
Should I speak to that, Julian?
Yeah, if you have something to say, please.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
I think, again, I mean, this is basically kind of a departmental cluster of a couple faculty members working on land related issues and PhD students. So basically what we do is talk about dissertations and our own ongoing research projects. I mean, I myself am a political scientist, and so I've been kind of interested in land law reform debates in African countries. And, a couple PhD students that I've had have worked on kind of spatially uneven evolution of land policy at the subnational level in African countries. One, Yue Zhou, who we mentioned a few minutes ago, is working on Chinese investment in the land sector in East Africa, and, kind of talking about the different sorts of Chinese firms that were coming into the land sector and how they sort of reacted to or took advantage of the legal regimes prevailing in Tanzania and Zambia. And my colleague at UCL, Alex Hartman, was also working on sort of investment, large scale land investments as shaped by on the ground land tenure regimes her work was mostly in West Africa. So, it was kind of just really opportunistically driven by ourselves and our students and our own research projects. I think, what was nice about it was we had kind of a shared interest, and the methodologies were quite different, from sort of more, ethnographically kind of research designs that pursue ethnographic work kind of within the templates of the legal structure of land tenure on the ground, and some people doing like regression discontinuity designs to find out like how state land versus investment might differ on state versus customary land along a margin. And it was really quite again sort of supply driven in that we just presented what we were working on. There wasn't a particular substantive focus, but it somehow seemed like everybody was at the intersection of, looking at law and legal regimes and how these interacted with, local actors, investment strategies and their land rights and, other aspects of the political economic context. I would say we've not really followed a climate thread as such, or a gender thread or a policy thread as such. It's been, I would say there's a kind of more of a bias towards the politics of land, of shaping and implementing land law, if I had to generalize. Yeah. But we're quite open, and what we're looking for, I think, is indeed sort of connections and interesting work that kind of feeds a sort of broader mutual research agenda and interest. People wanting to be informed. What are other people doing? What are they working on? What methods are interesting? What do they observe? And that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's been a long-standing and fairly common interest, certainly amongst myself and Catherine and other members of the group, in the progress or lack of progress of long-standing efforts at land reform in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly, whether that's tenure reform in some cases, tending towards individualization, or looking for a sustainable incorporation, if you like, of customary rights, customary practice into land policy and the design of land administration systems that can support that sustainably going forward. And I suppose that was one of the key bases, the key kind of rationale for interest on the part of DFID in launching a land facility. The fact that land administration is just not really up to the job. And that's partly because land has been a bit of a political football for African governments. I suppose the climate issue, we had some interest. So there was Matt Candell who left us a year ago, and he had a strong interest in land use. So he presented some work, which was also subsequently published, on farmer-led conservation activities. And I think the interesting thing in the context of the climate agenda and the growing tendency of urbanization and migration displacement is, well, how do conceptions of property rights that are embedded in policy, how do the principal forms of tenure, how does the way government manages land, including allocating land for outside investment, what bearing does that have on the scope for not only climate friendly agriculture, but sustainable solutions for land and land use management more broadly? And I'd expect that to be a growing issue in future. I know some of the people who've joined us, your research interests in that area. So, I mean, I think we'd very much welcome any contributions, any discussions in that area. You'd be welcome to pitch ideas, even if it's just for an informal discussion, and see if we could incorporate that into the seminar program. And then that in turn could be a basis for wider discussions on how to take these questions forward. We had thought of organizing a little symposium. You know, it's interesting that Shasha is organizing a symposium now on collective tenure and the urban context. We had thought of doing something on land reforms in Africa, where they're going, where they're heading in the current context, but that was rather pinned to the kind of possible platform for engaging with DFID or FCDO. But we could still do things like that. We could still take an initiative to run a half-day workshop, because as it is, we're restricted into like 2-hour slots, normally on a Tuesday evening, which in some ways is not really quite enough. And then every discussion is parked until we get together at the DSA conference, when there's a very broad agenda and people have lots of sessions to go to. So again, we don't really get the focus. But I mean, I think whether it's by joining the discussion group or networking via email, we can see what the ideas are, and there are resources at DSA that we could tap into if we wanted to organize a half day or a one-day workshop. So that's always possible.
I think Ogeto's raised a point similarly, if I may, Julian, because I don't
Please.
think you can see the chat.
I'm not
He
seeing
says,
the hands here.
no, he's said in his chat, he's got poor connection, but he'd like to know the views on land rights and sustainability, which kind of feeds in nicely to what I've been saying, but you might want to say something on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure that right now would be the moment to do that.
I mean, going forward, that
going
could be
forward,
a
yes,
dimension
exactly.
if Ogeto was, sorry, that's what I meant, yeah.
I mean, I think what would be useful is to have perhaps one or more short contributions to seminar discussion that would give us a hook to hang it on, really, because it's so context dependent, really. There may be common issues, but discussing that in the abstract. Shailaja, I was very interested in your interest in land use and the possible focus on linking land use sustainability issues in UK and more globally. Although I'm not quite sure what that might involve if we were to say,
for example, discussions on agriculture and subsidies, which we are bound to deal with in the UK, and it's a classic story for much of at least South Asia, the inappropriate use of, or inaccurate or inefficient use of subsidies, whatever language you want to use, but also there's this whole commodification of land, which in a way is what's been driving the story without looking at other forms of land use, which are, as you said, either communal or informal or other ways. And therefore multiple forms of marginalization have occurred. And I think what Agatha's asking more specifically is Ethiopia, where the government owns the land, which is another extreme form. So, you know, I guess you're absolutely right, Julian, it is the specificities of land ownership. But there's the letter of the law and land ownership, and then what actually happens. And I think a lot of the interesting features, the excitement is in that detail. So I agree with you, a paper very specifically would be nice. I'm just raising that because again, in the UK, we don't know. I mean, the farmers in the Fenlands, which is one of the 3 areas we're working in. So working in the Fenlands, in the Cairngorms and Cumbria. And in all 3, the commonality is from the point of view of the big climate change story, peatlands. But from the point of view of the farmers, they just want a living, and they're already the most impoverished group. So in a way, interestingly, these forms of inequality are not different in farming in the global north, if we take the UK and maybe some countries in the global south. So it's those mechanisms that's the commonality. I'll shut up or I'll turn into a lecture now.
Well, it would be very interesting to hear more. And so perhaps, you know, based on your research on that project, you could give a little presentation to the seminar group, and that in turn could be a springboard for a wider discussion. So please feel free to get in touch with us. Contact myself and Weiju if you have a suggestion. The seminars normally run in the autumn and spring terms. We have about 6 or 8, but potentially we could have some more. So it's not oversubscribed already, is it, Catherine? I haven't heard anything about the program for next year.
We have a couple slots in the spring.
Right. Okay. But so likely Weiju would be sending something out in September.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we're working on the program right now. So
okay. So perhaps she and I should get together. We should touch base. I'll be retired, but I can always be contacted. I can always engage. We should touch base on that and get a mail out, including to everybody who's joined us today. If you send us your email addresses, and we can say what's on the program already, and we'll have a clear idea of what the gaps are, which you could potentially fill, and then we could take it from there. Regarding coordination, so as I said, the coordination has been really done by PhD students at LSE for the seminar group. I've acted as a convener at the DSA level. We had Matt Kandel, who had a strong interest in land use sustainability, but he was off to the USA about a year ago. Tom Lavers from Manchester, again, was quite linked into the urbanization agenda. But Tom gives his apologies, by the way, he couldn't come today. So Tom was nominally a convener as well, but we are really looking for an additional convener. I think Catherine's agenda has been very, very full at LSE with various responsibilities, and she's already coordinating the seminar group. So as regards convening at the DSA level, that's really beyond her bandwidth. So I'm still very much in the picture. But we very much welcome an additional convener. Doesn't mean anybody has to step forward now, unless you're really minded to do so. But during the autumn, say, once we get the seminar series on the road, and we start talking about ideas for additional activities, somebody else may be interested in taking up that role. And I think it's something which can probably serve your career at any level, whether you're a PhD student, a lecturer, or a professor. If it's something you want to take forward, it's a good platform, and it's a good platform for feeding into the next year's Development Studies Conference as well. So, won't ask anyone now. Please let us know if anyone is interested in taking up a convening or coordinating role, but more likely you'd want to suck it and see, as we say, to come along to some sessions and hear some more about what we do and what we have to say.
Right. Or if I can, like the way I would put this is, we're looking for somebody to be the coordinator of the land, politics, and development group within the DSA, right, Julian? So this person would mostly need to be thinking about panels, I think, right? And kind of take the lead on giving us a presence at the DSA. So like this year, Sasha put together a panel with Carolyn Dieterle, who was also one of our group members at the LSE, my PhD student who just defended a few weeks ago. And Julian really pushed the DSA side. Like he organized this meeting, for example, and put together the agenda. You know, so I think what we're looking for is you know, to decide whether anybody wants to do this at the DSA. I think one particularity of the group is that its main activity, besides having a presence at the DSA, is this LSE seminar series. So it's pretty low key group, but you know, it's not to say that somebody else couldn't develop new directions if they wanted to. And, you know, indeed, that would be great if somebody wanted to.
The things I would pick up on in addition to that, perhaps, are things that Sam mentioned at the AGM recently, that in addition to wanting to kind of re-energize the study groups as a whole, there have been a series of webinars. So if we had, you know, something to say on land use sustainability and inequality in UK and internationally in relation to any key policy development, that could be a good excuse for a webinar. There was a good webinar on the new UK so-called development strategy, and that's something which I think the DSA wants to kind of monitor. We tried to feed into it at the beginning without much success, but we're conscious that it's very much a question of how things are implemented, and that really FCDO will need to look towards good research and academic knowledge in order to really inform its strategy. So, you know, something could come up. The UK land facility might be launched. So in relation to these things, you know, holding a webinar and engaging with policy, there may be some concrete opportunities to do so. But we can also use the seminar group as a basis to discuss those ideas. So yes, I'm very grateful. I really wasn't sure that anybody else was going to turn up, and it's very gratifying that you know, that you've come along and shown interest in the group. Thing I would like to ask our Nomad IT volunteer, you can capture the chat, and if perhaps those of you who haven't done so already could put your email addresses on the chat, then we can pass them all to Weiju. That's if you're not already on the list. So I saw you put there, but if other people could also do so, and I'm not sure how we ensure that we don't lose this chat. I'd like to get a record of it.
Yeah.
If Nomad IT can provide that. Noticing we have more people who've joined us. Some have gone, I think. But we have Cameron Middleton, Nadif Musyafa. Nadif or Cameron, would you like to say a few words? Or not, if you don't wish to, if you feel like you've just...
Sure, I can introduce myself. I joined some of the land politics seminars. I'm a UN Habitat consultant researcher, so I'm really just a bandwagon jumper, not an academic, but I have been looking at I work on the urban recovery framework, sort of post-conflict issues for habitat, and it's a mess, but interesting. And so work on Yemen's sort of tribal land recognition issues in relation to the conflict, and actually back to what was being discussed earlier on sustainability and smallholder prospects going forward in a kind of apocalyptic scenario is a main concern as it relates to, you know, a lack of coordination in the humanitarian response with some of the longer term land use issues and prospects and what's happening with developers, obviously. And so the master plans it's Syria, Yemen, whichever country you want to look at, master plans are not coordinated with the kind of the events which are overtaking everyone so quickly. So I don't really know which, I'm interested in graduate programs longer term because the questions seem to have a few solutions which are working out. Anyway, that's my rant and where I'm coming from. So I've enjoyed the seminar immensely, and I did do a little presentation with panel 24, the York group, on sustainable infrastructure, or a critical scholarship on infrastructure. So that Bobby, Carmen, the others.
Okay, no, it would be interesting to hear more if you had anything to contribute to our seminar group. Nadif, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Julian. So actually, recently about land, I was interested to to learn or to do research about indigenous land. Yeah, recently. Yeah, like how the government deal with the indigenous land that couple hundred years ago, the indigenous people have settled in that land. So I think that's kind of interesting. Is that in your scope too?
Sorry?
Is that in today's scope?
Well, I think so. As we said, the the group is open-ended. What would be great, of course, is to get more contributions from people, and although time is a limitation, to use the discussions for cross-fertilization, and so we can start to think about land issues in these broader contexts. And certainly, urban infrastructure, displaced people, the outcomes for host populations and smallholders in the climate context is, these are going to be critical issues going forward. And I feel as though the land policy doesn't really have the tools for addressing them. It's all been about land reform, or it's all been about distributive land reform or land titling. And in a sense, the challenges today, climate and conflict and urban challenges, take us beyond that. So there's a need for creative solutions. There's a need for more interaction, researchers from different points of view. Whether or not we can contain all of that within a land politics and sustainability discussion group, I don't know. But the conference, picks up much broader issues. Anyway, it's been great to have your participation. We're 5-4 now. In terms of next steps, as I said earlier, I think Weiju from LSE or one of her colleagues will be sending out an email. If we can get all of your contacts, feel free to write me as well with any other ideas. We can put that all into the pot and be in touch in September. And we very much look forward to seeing some of you at the seminar group, to hearing your ideas, to getting some contributions, especially if anyone's interested in organizing some slightly higher level activities at the DSA level that are more public, that can bring in more people. Any other comments from anyone before we close? Thank you for putting all your emails on the chat. And Nomad IT, I don't know, email me a transcript of the chat, or let us know.
I can email you one, Julian.
Oh, you know how to do that.
Barely.
You're more tech savvy than I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Sasha, I hope you feel better.
So much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay, well, nice to see you. Thanks for joining, everybody. Thanks, Tuesday, Geralio, Shailaja, I hope I got that right, Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing.
Thanks for organizing,
everyone.
Julian.
This is so
Thanks for
interesting.
bringing us together.
Okay.
Thank you, Julian and Catherine.
Thank you.
Colin,
Bye-bye.
everybody, thanks very much. And
Thank
of
you
course,
very much.
Catherine.
Take care.
Have a
Okay,
blessed time.
thanks. We'll be in touch.
Ciao.